Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to get started. My name is Carlos Diaz-Rosillo. I'm the founding director of the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom. And I'm really delighted, although a little tired, because I just landed about 5 hours ago from a long flight. But I'm really delighted to welcome all of you to this event that is going to explore digital transformation in providing government services, a really fascinating topic that we haven't really tackled at the center yet. So this is the first of hopefully many events that we'll talk about, where we will discuss e-government. Just a brief intro about the center. Most of you know the center already, but I see a few new faces. We were created 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, by the legislature and the governor of Florida to work at the intersection of the free market and policy work. We have a number of educational programs, research programs, and public events. The crown jewel of our educational initiatives is the Senior Leadership Fellows Program, which is a program that brings to Miami, to the center, 5 top government officials, people who have served at the highest levels of government, to share with our students their experiences, to talk about leadership, to talk about policies that they implemented, in some cases successfully, in some cases they emphasize the mistakes they made. President Guaido was a fellow. Where's the president? There he is. He was a fellow a couple of years ago. And with us, we have a current fellow, Diana Arcon, who is the representative of Mexico to the World Bank. Thank you, Diana. This is really an exciting project. And we were just approved very recently by the university. Next week, we'll go to the Board of Trustees, and then following that, the Board of Governors. We were approved to offer a Bachelor of Science in Business and Government Leadership and a Master of Science in Business and Government Leadership. Sort of a combination. Thank you. It's kind of a combination between an MBA and an MPA, so that our students can get skills to be successful leaders in both the private and the public sector. So that's what we're doing. We have a lot of public events. We're now taking the idea of the Senior Leadership Program that inspires students here in Miami, and we're taking it abroad. And so we've done it in a number of countries. Most recently, a week ago in Peru, we had two very successful courses, one for business leaders and one for public servants. Sold out crowd, almost 100 students between the two courses. And so we're getting started. And this is, as I mentioned, the first event where we're going to talk about e-government and the importance of e-government for our societies. This is a project or an idea that came out of discussions between myself and Patricia. Patricia is really the author of this project. I'm going to introduce her in a couple of minutes so that she can get going with the program. But the idea is to have an hour and a half of conversation with 3 very distinguished panelists that Patricia will get to introduce. She'll moderate the discussion. Let me just tell you a little bit about Patricia, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to miss anything of a very impressive resume. She's a distinguished business leader and policy advisor with extensive international experience across technology and economic development sectors. She currently serves as a foreign trade advisor to the French government and provides strategic counsel on international commerce and digital transformation initiatives. And we're very fortunate that she's also with us at the center, leading a project exploring the intersection of the free market, technology, and governance innovation. And again, all our programming on e-government and the use of technology to provide better government services are really part of Patricia's great work at the center. So we're very fortunate, Patricia, that you're here with us. Thank you to all of you. And Patricia, I'm going to let you take it away so you can start the next hour and a half of activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you all to be there. We were making time for that people to come. Perhaps they will join later. As Carlos was saying, it's super important to understand how the public sector and the private sector can work together, and how GovTech can have a role in digitizing our governments and make it easier together. Over the past decade, we've indeed witnessed an accelerated global push toward digitizing governments, services, and interfaces. with citizens. While some initiatives have done very good results, some others have really put in light some lacks in transparency, some lacks in equity, and the erosion of trust. I'm thinking about countries that have made it very well, like Estonia, Denmark, and other countries of Europe, Singapore, in Asia. And here in Latin America or in the region, we've made a lot of progress around digitizing governments with the e-invoicing and many other initiatives that are permitting to vote better, to have a better relationship with our citizens. But there is still a lot to do. So the real question that we are going to go through with our panel today and the presentation of the Consul of France, Raphaël Trapp, is there really a case for digital government? What do we have to do still so that all these become a reality? How are we going to work better together between the technology companies and the government so that we can make tools that permits us to give that transparency, that permits us to accelerate that improvement of the relationship between the governments and the citizen, and in the end, to rebuild sometimes, to build sometimes this trust that we need to be working well all together. For the first part, I'm going to let the space here to our Consul General of France, Raphaël Trapp, who is going to share with you what we've done in France. So as you heard, my intonation, I'm French. I've been spending all my career, as Carlos has presented before, working for French or European countries, expanding their business in the Americas and Latin America, all technology companies, and always working hand in hand with the different governments so that we can find solutions to solve how to digitize better and quicker our governments. Raphaël Trapp is going to comment with us what we've done in France, how we've done it, what we've done well, and what we could do better, for sure. Let me introduce in a little word our consul, Raphaël Trapp. Raphaël Trapp is the Consul General in France since September 2022 here. In Miami, he also has the responsibility for a series of islands and territories in the region: Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Caymans, and perhaps I'm forgetting some of them. Raphaël Trapp has been an alumnus of the Faculty of Law in Paris. He has also studied in the Institute of Administration in France before he joined for first time the Foreign Affairs Ministry in 2003. Since that time, he's been evoluting in different organizations of our French administration, the General Administration Department of the Budgetary Office of France, where he has had very specific missions focused on human rights. Human rights is a very cheer subject to him, and I think that he will now explain to all of us how, before coming here to Miami too, he's been involved in many policies and many GovTechs that are heading to be cheering our rights and our communication between citizens and governments. Raphaël?
Good afternoon to all. Thank you very much, Patricia, for this presentation. And indeed, France has done a lot in e-government to facilitate the life of the citizen, whether it's to declare the taxes, whether it's to facilitate the acquisition of new documents as passports, etc., etc. But today, I wanted to address a different topic, related, of course, to e-government. You will see that. But I would like to speak to you about the management of risk reputation for government. And in particular, in the geopolitical context that we all know nowadays. I would like to speak to you about how France responded to that risk reputational management and how it deals with it. And you will see it's really new for us, and we think it's really important. You know that social networks have taken a primary part in our lives. Several times a day, we consult them, we react to the posts we see, we relay the information, and sometimes we create content ourselves. They have become the main modes of information for many people who most of the time believe what they see or what they read. Social networks create a lot of opportunities and benefits for users who can stay in touch with their loved ones, share ideas, make money. Of course, there are many positive aspects related to that technology. But we must also be aware that the inflation of polarized and violent content and the absence of hierarchy of this content in the information space are conducive to information manipulation actions. And users are micro-targeted by hyper-personalized content that will polarize their perception of the world by fragmenting the reality, which is really serious because these actions constitute or may constitute a cyber-cognitive destabilization of individuals. And these manipulations are not a new phenomenon, but digital technology has transformed both their reach and their impact. As early as 2018, a study by the MIT estimated that on average, false information circulates 6 times faster than reliable information on Twitter. France is particularly targeted by hostile information maneuvers. Its diplomatic and military action, the opening of its domestic media space, and its presence in many parts of the world expose it to hostile maneuvers. France's competitors are developing increasingly offensive strategies with a simple objective: to polarize public debate and destabilize our liberal democracy. Russian ambitions in Africa, as well as French support for Ukraine, have generated a growing volume of informational attack from Russia. Journalistic investigation based on Kremlin documents have shown that the Russian regime would invest nearly $1 billion a year in conducting information operations. In its latest report of August 2024, Meta indicated that Russia would remain the first source of coordinated, inauthentic behavior on social networks. Thus, it has become clear that the response to informational threat is a necessity in order to counter reputational and security risk, since one of the objectives pursued is to have an impact in real life. For example, by organizing boycotts of different products or services, by conducting operation or by inciting the organization of demonstrations on the streets, organization of blockages, or even violence. We are here at the heart of our topic today because it seemed necessary to us to act to build trust in public debate, because it is public debate that is the foundation of any democracy. The response to information manipulation has therefore become a new public policy of France and a priority of its foreign policy. Be mindful, please, I insist on this point. It is not at all our intention to say what is true or what is false. We do not have a ministry of truth, and everyone is free to say what they think on social networks, even if it's completely false, and as long as the law is respected. If this opinion grows and is shared by many users, that is not our problem. journalists and fact checkers have the role of verifying these opinions. It is not the role of the state. What is our problem, on the other hand, are inauthentic behaviors, those that are artificial, those that respond to a digital modus operandi and that aim to harm us by amplifying political divide and exploiting existing polemics. I will give you example of this later. So since 2020, France has strengthened its means of monitoring and analyzing information manipulations around two lines. First, the creation of an open source investigation service, and second, in strengthening the monitoring, alert, and respond mechanisms abroad via my ministry, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. I would like to talk about the investigation service. So it was necessary to create this from scratch, starting in 2017 after foreign interference in the French presidential campaign, because we previously had no capacity in this field. So that service, that is called Viginum, the role of that service is to detect and characterize foreign digital interference with an approach focused on the operating methods and analysis of broadcast networks. To be considered a foreign digital interference, a manipulation of information must meet 4 cumulative criteria: a potential attack on the fundamental interest of the nation, an inaccurate or misleading content, an artificial or automated, massive and deliberate dissemination, and 4, the direct or indirect involvement of a foreign actor, whether it's the state, parastate, or non-state actors from time to time. A very important clarification. This service, Viginum, investigates by respecting a framework of action that has been established by law, by the legislators, and in particular because it involves the automated processing of personal data. What interests Viginum, I repeat it, it's not the content of the information, but the mechanics of the container. That is to say, the digital infrastructure, but also the metadata. And it's aimed to understand and reveal the methods of operation of this information by focusing on the technical elements. And the specificity of Viginum is to work exclusively on open sources, so to do OSINT. It does not use intrusive intelligence technique, even if it then works with the intelligence community. So it's time for me to be more precise about manipulations. And to illustrate my point, I will tell you about the war in Ukraine, or rather, how the subject of the war in Ukraine could constitute manipulations of information in France. So Viginum opened operations dedicated to the search for foreign digital interference related to that war and the repercussions of this war in the French digital public debate. And in this context, Viginum characterized the activity of several Russian informational modes of operation as constituting foreign digital interference. The actors of the Russian influence apparatus and their informational modus operandi use a wide range of tactics, techniques, and procedures, such as the animation of avatars on social networks to disseminate propaganda content, the creation of fake news websites, the instrumentalization of civil society groups and foreign political parties, or the amplification in the information field of actions carried out in the physical field. So I will take 2 examples that have been publicly denounced after a careful investigation by Viginum. First example, the operation Doppelganger. Since the spring of 2022, the modus operandi known as Doppelganger has been trying to undermine Western support for Ukraine by targeting France and other European countries. To do this, Doppelganger relies on a network of several hundred disinformation websites, which Viginum groups into two categories. Websites usurping the identity of media, such as Le Monde in France, Der Spiegel in Germany, the Washington Post in the US, and usurping the identity of different institutions, such as NATO, but even though my ministry. And they do that via typo squatting techniques. Second category, French-speaking so-called media specialize in targeted themes like sport, lifestyles, European news, etc., disseminating articles on the anti-Ukrainian editorial line. So doppelganger operators try to promote these resources on online platforms, mainly on X, Facebook, but also TikTok, using networks of accounts and pages inauthentic, created by bots, and amplifying their visibility via sponsor content. Second example, Operation Matryoshka. Active since September 2023, Operation Matryoshka aims to discredit and disrupt the work of the mainstream media and the fact-checking community in which several French organizations have been targeted. It consists on the coordinated publication of fake first-time content on Telegram, you know, that network from Russia, reports, screenshots, etc., in the response space of X account posts of media, personalities, and fact-checking cells. So Matryoshka operators directly call their targets on X or via their email address to ask them to investigate these fake content. So you see, this is a strategy of saturation of the space. And while the narratives propagated by Matryoshka mainly target the Ukrainian government, the content posted online has also targeted the French policy of support for Ukraine, French political figures, as well as divisive or anxiety-provoking themes related in France to immigration, domestic security, the economy, or major sports events such as the Paris Olympic Games. So those two modus operandi have been publicly attributed to Russian state actors, but also to private actors to whom the Russian government subcontracts the execution of information operation, or who finance operations themselves with the aim of obtaining financial or political benefits. Viginum is also working with the major social media groups to inform them of the existence of fake accounts or botnet-backed accounts and violation of their general policy of use, especially when it concerns content. So there is indeed significant collaboration between France and the platforms that I've just mentioned. So when the investigation gathers enough evidence, there is the attribution stage. I told you earlier that Viginum does not use intrusive intelligence technique, but only online information, but it works with the intelligence community to share the clues it has found and to find evidence of manipulation of information by one or more particular actors. And this work with the intelligence community makes it possible to identify the perpetrators with the high probability rates. Because this is like the cyber attacks, you know, it's not the investigative services that publicly attributes manipulation of information, constituting foreign interference. This is a decision that is a matter for the political power. And in the two examples I mentioned, the French political power felt that it had enough concordant elements to denounce Russia. So the attribution policy aims at informing users of social networks and calls on them to be vigilant about the content they receive. It is also relayed by the mainstream media so that as many people as possible can know that there is a manipulation. But attribution can take time because, as I said, it is based on careful investigation, and manipulations of information require a quick reaction to stop their amplification. And in Paris, this is where the spokesperson of my ministry, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, intervenes. And abroad, it is where the French embassies intervenes. For instance, the French embassy in Washington. And the ministry works for monitoring and for reaction. The press services of the embassy are responsible for carrying out monitoring work in order to identify hostile actors operating in their local or even regional information ecosystems, and to detect the narratives and false information that they could propagate to harm French interests. It is this work that will help Viginum to explore different leads of investigation. Then, whether in Paris or abroad, the ministry is entitled to carry out actions aimed at restoring the facts in at least 3 cases. First, the restoration of facts is a priority in the event of falsification or theft of websites or documents of the ministry, the impersonation of other French institutional actors, or false publication on French positions and activities abroad. Second, some disinformation campaigns can generate major security risks for French interests and nationals and French nationals abroad, and can lead to physical attacks against an embassy. That's what happened to us in Burkina Faso a few years ago. And third, rapid response actions can help limit the virality of false information that could damage France's reputation abroad. Beyond attribution, reactions to manipulations can take on a European dimension and fall within the scope of international sanctions. As early as March 2022, the Council of the European Union put in place restrictive measures aimed at countering propaganda actions carried out by Russia to justify and support its aggression, which led to the suspension of the broadcasting activities of the Russian transnational media, RT and Sputnik. Other sanctions targeted at disinformation actors can be decided, such as restricting entry into the territory of the European Union or freezing their assets. Last point that I want to mention, what are the trends observed by Viginum in terms of manipulation of information by foreign entities? They have observed an increase of detections. 138 manipulation in 2023, 230 in 2024, and this is an increase of more than 40% in a year. Second trend, a sophistication of operating methods, in particular through the use of artificial intelligence for content generation, for the reactivity of malicious actors, or the stealth of operational maneuvers. And last trend, an increased use of intermediation, meaning digital marketing or web development companies, so the private sector, that will build disinformation infrastructures for more stealth by sponsor. And this is the transposition of a classic Russian modus operandi for hacking operations. It will find hackers, not necessarily Russians, pressure them or pay them to act harmfully in cyberspace. In conclusion, I would like to say that lying, concealing, inventing for the purpose of intentionally deceiving, of polarizing public debate, of inciting hatred and violence, and of undermining democracy, this is not the exercise of freedom of expression. It is an act of cognitive warfare designed to justify the worst intention, the worst behaviors in terms of morality and law. No country, no population is immune to this type of action made possible by the digital tools we all use every day. In 2021, a study by the Oxford Internet Institute estimated that 81 countries had been hit by sophisticated disinformation campaigns. And now we are 4 years on, and the world is even more polarized than before. For France, the time of inaction is over because we have developed an organization that monitors, detects, investigates, draws conclusions, reveals, attributes, and responds. Our goal is to protect ourselves from the tactics of authoritarian regimes that want to weaken us. Our goal is to maintain trust in our public debate and therefore in our democracy. I thank you.
Thank you, Consul Raphaël Trapp. Do you have some question for the Council before we go on the debate? What we've been doing in France? Some questions?
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Really interesting, the strategy that France is following to understand the foreign threats. I'm interested in learning the connections of this strategy to the recent AI Action Summit. What kinds of new working groups or policy developments are happening in the front of AI, cybersecurity, and risk management?
Thank you very much for this question, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the AI Action Summit that has been held in France in the beginning of February. So this event was really important for France because we wanted to highlight our capacity in terms of development of AI, because France, and in particular Paris, is a center, a world center for research in AI, and especially with different big companies as Meta, that has created his laboratory for research and development in AI 10 years ago. And now a lot of companies are coming to Paris to develop their own, because in France we have a huge capacity in terms of training students in mathematics. And as you know, mathematics are really important to forge the models of AI. So this event was to showcase France's capacity, but it was also aimed to gather different countries and to address different topics, actual topics on AI. We have decided to shed light on the opportunities of AI on our lives, on a daily basis, on our businesses, etc., and not to focus the entire summit on the risks. I know that UK previously has chosen to make a different approach. We didn't want to have that only approach on the risk, but we mentioned it, of course. And on that side, what we think is really important for the countries is to discuss the risk that they have observed, that they have felt in their daily work, and to try to understand what kind of reactions can be opposed to those risks. And I mentioned in my presentation the use of AI in terms of disseminating false information that wants to harm the reputation of a country, and clearly this is a risk. So I think that on the technical side, it's really hard to regulate that form of risk, because this is inherent of the technology itself. But as I explained, the type of reaction that we have set up is really useful to be, yes, in reaction of such an event, but I think it's going to be really difficult to try to regulate it, because this is the main purpose of AI, to generate content, to also be better in the action on the infrastructure, etc., etc. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. There's no more questions here?
If you were to stand back and think to yourself, does it really make any sense to have connected the world in such a way that the minute we create something, we need to create something to defend ourselves from those that are wanting to do harm. And at every turn, people seem to be trying to figure out how to use technology against us in order for us to spend more money in trying to defend it. Does it make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, you are entering into a philosophical debate, of course, and more precisely on the human nature, because the tools themselves, I mean, they are harmless. It is the use of those tools that make them really dangerous. And I think that we have no choice but to react to the misuse of those tools. And we do so as long as there is a human on Earth, I'm afraid so.
Hi, Consul General, thank you for the presentation. I'm Professor Eric De La Fuente here at FIU. We were talking about some of these things before, having lived in Eastern Europe. I have two questions I'm interested. On the one hand is, how much is France or other Western European countries working back with some of the Eastern European countries, which have been the laboratory of Russian disinformation going back 20 years? I'm thinking of Moldova, Estonia, and of course, Ukraine didn't start now. It's been more than 2 decades in incorporating technology. So how much in some of these programs are those folks who are really had the brunt of it early on? Because what Western Europe is experiencing is more polished or what has taken place in these countries. That's one question, what type of exchange has going in place. And the other is more your thoughts. I mean, when I think of the good presentation you made, I think of the handrails or the restraints that a lot of the Western governments have, and they react right to Russian disinformation when a lot of the way to play defense is to play offense, and the Russians play very good offense. So, do you think that a lot of the constraints you have to go on the offensive before something happens in terms of preemptive hampers a little bit that effort? So, one is a lesson learned, the other is a little bit more on the constraints.
Yeah. Yes, I think that we have to react to this because this is the counterpart of our freedom and of our liberty. We want to have a liberal democracy. We want to have a free debate. We want to promote and to preserve the freedom of expression. So our information space is really open, contrary to different countries as Russia, as China, etc. The list is really long. So indeed, for those countries, this is really easy, to block the system and to prevent different countries as to try to diffuse the information, even though we don't use the same tactics as Russia, because we don't want to. We feel that this is not the way, to play in the international scene. So we don't do that. But we have to react because our informational space is open, and this is the counterpart of our freedom. So this is the first point. And on the cooperation with different countries from Eastern Europe, so the cooperation is really easy with those countries that belongs to the European Union, of course, even though from time to time it's really complicated because we have to take into account the balance of power within those countries. And in certain cases, for instance, in Romania, it is really difficult, for them to have such a policy because the political scene is polarized. So it's really complicated. For other countries, you mentioned Estonia, you mentioned Poland. We can say also about Finland, it's more easy to cooperate with them on our own model. Because there is a consensus within those countries that there is a threat in the informational space from Russia.
Thank you. One last question before we go to the panel.
Very interesting, all points of views, and France is one of the leading countries on technology, especially. Let's go back to the basics: data, internet, the existence of the cables of. How do you? My name is Alice McLaughlin. I'm the CEO of Sync Data AI. What we do is GovTech or RegTech. How do you see RegTech in eGov, which is the main topic of this conversation? Are you applying any tools within your government to make it more efficient? Right now, we're going through tremendous changes where now Americans are back to read news 3 times a day for the latest. But at the end of the day, the overall goal, despite the journey through it might not look very humane, is efficiencies.
Sure.
What are you doing for it?
Sure, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Um, I wanted to mention that topic because, as I said, this is really a threat on our model of democracy, and this is the threat on how people in France also is living. So, of course, the French government has deployed a lot of different solutions to improve its efficiency in terms of governing people. I mentioned earlier the tax system. So now you can, declare all your taxes in the internet without the terrible paperwork that we had to do previously. I can give you also an example for voting. In certain instances, not all elections, but for the French that live abroad, it's allowed now to vote by the internet. And this one is really difficult because of cybersecurity concerns. So the government has to validate, the solution really carefully. But for the people that live abroad, it's really an improvement because they don't have to come to the consulate to vote. They can vote in their couch really, really easily. And we try to develop as many as procedures, digital, etc., as possible to simplify the life of the French citizens. And of course, we rely on the private sectors to ask them for new ideas, for new solutions, and we work in close terms with them.
Indeed, I can testify. I'm a resident in Mexico, and I was able to vote online for our last presidential election. So this is really a difference, yeah. Thank you, Raphaël Trapp. I'm now going to ask our panel to join me here for the second part of the event. Thank you very much, Raphaël Trapp. Please join me, Juan Guaido, former interim president of Venezuela and founder of our e-democracy lab here at Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom. Cristina Martinez Pinto, the founder of PIT Democracy Lab in Mexico. And Ibrahim Asaim, the founder of GovLink AI and equodate.com. We wanted to put light on how we apply all this in our countries, how we have a reality around GovTech, as per your question before, because it is important that we make some policies so that we can use technology to accelerate our government digitization and the relationship with our citizens in all the fields. Building trust is very complicated. Destroying trust is a second. So we have now with us 3 persons that have a different insight on how we apply those technologies, what we're going to make, what we have to make more, so that this is a better reality. So I'm going to have some different questions to them. We want that to be very dynamic. Please make questions if you have. And I've asked them to really base that on their experience, on what we do, not only what policies we've made or what we've decided to do in each country, but how we apply, how this is reality in each of our countries. I'm going to start with Juan. But based on your experience, as an interim president of Venezuela, but also now here in the States with your project of the Democracy Lab. How can digital tools help to strengthen democratic institutions in the countries facing the government challenges?
Well, thank you for the initiative. I mean, right now, the democracy is like in decline, not only in Venezuela, in Latin America, also around the world. 20% of the people around the world, only 20% live in full democracies, according to the latest Freedom House report. So it's not only about governance, it's about democracy. And I think this came primarily. I mean, we have a lot of issues, not only problems, but also alternative opportunities. The consul speak minutes ago about misinformation, disinformation, cyber attacks, manipulate information. I mean, propaganda, war propaganda around the world, and that undermine democracy, liberty, governance around the world. For me, in this moment, is the delivery gap, you know, between the politicals promise and what can we achieve and the expectation of the people in this moment around the world. We live in an interconnected world in this moment. I mean, we demand solution as fast as we consume information in this moment. So that gap has become also a problem. So the human-centered focus on technology need to help us to close that gap, to delivery, to achieve, to make accountable politicals, to make more transparent the public policies around the world. We're in Venezuela, in the middle of the pandemic situation. We have this experience that we call héroes de la salud, that we through
Heroes of the health. Heroes of the health.
heroes of health, yeah, health heroes.
Health heroes.
In the middle of the pandemic situation, the regime blocked all the possible solutions, vaccines, humanitarian aid. I mean, a lot of possible solutions. The regime blocked the solution. So we use crypto assets and blockchain to deliver $300 in that moment to maybe 70,000 families around Venezuela, healthcare frontliners around Venezuela to save life. So we avoid the blockade of the regime. We use crypto assets. We have to digitalize a lot of information. We have to alphabetize also a lot of people, not only in crypto assets, in digital wallets, also in VPN, because when the regime look over the solution, they came after the IP addresses of all web pages, and in that moment came the VPN solution. And just imagine the misinformation war in a country without official public information, with fully censorship around. So these kind of tools can help not only in weak democracies, not only in big countries, also to confront the dictator regime, closing this gap. In that moment, we help to save life, but also to confront the regime. We use our main database. We create a new database to consult people, and with blockchain tools, we raise a huge database in weeks, maybe 2-3 millions through apps with the phone in a country without electricity or full connectivity, and we can provide like a popular consult that the people vote to participate or not in the coming elections. That was early 2021 in that moment. So for me, in a dictatorship country, confronting brutal repression, censorship, when the bad guys use also the technology to make a lot of noise, saturing the broadcast, online and offline. Because when we think in propaganda, maybe we think in a flyer, with people in the street like, take this flyer. No, no, no. I mean, they want to make psyops, psychological operations, social control. I mean, this is, so here in the Consul, I only was thinking, I'm sorry, about Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Belarus. I mean, this, and let's figure it and imagine how they operate and how they replicate the misinformation that they used to misinformate France. And people in Venezuela, in Latin America, when you ask about RT, Russia Today, they don't know about that. They only saw a logo, a verified account, and they think it's a good information, it's truth, and they replicate the information because they think he came from a good source. So it's not in this world, interconnected world, to make an offensive play, we need to interconnect the good guys and quickly, because we need to respond in a good and rapid way. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed, it's super interesting, and I'm going to do a rebound question to Christina on that matter. According to your experience, do you think we can solve that if we involve the people in the policy making? Because having them use is one thing, but if we involve them in the process of the policy, perhaps we will have a solution here, no?
Of course, I mean, the short answer is yes. The long one is thank you, the Adams Center for Economic Freedom, for the invitation to participate in this event. As I had told you before, I was a fellow at the Kimberly Green Center for Latin American and the Caribbean back in 2003 as part of the Young Leadership in the Americas initiative from the Department of State. So I'm really excited to be back in this beautiful campus and in this beautiful city. And to your question, yes, definitely. And the way I think about this is in 4 different categories, which all have to do with participatory processes and mechanisms and to some extent, the use of technology, but from different angles. And the first one has to do with combining people with technology as the main convener, with discussions around the uses of technology for the public interest. And I have a couple of examples for this. For instance, in 2019, 2020, we, at that time, I was leading an organization in C-Minds, AI for Good Lab, and we were heading a citizen-led coalition that was called IA 2030 MX. And we created this coalition because we felt there was a gap and there was no space for civil society to get involved in conversations around why having this AI from a policy perspective dialogue on how to leverage this technology for the different sectors and for economic development was important. And this is an effort that gathered more than 400 people through digital means and through open methodologies. Everything was shared, everything was open, everything was editable, commentable, not only in periods of public consultations, but the methodologies of the working groups themselves were completely open. And we developed like a co-working ideation accountability mechanism where we had leaders, but since they were co-responsible of delivering to each working group, then the participation rates were high. Of course, we came up with a lot of challenges, and we learned a lot in the process of civic organization. But in these 2 years of work, we not only created a community of practice, but came up with the first national agenda on AI and policy recommendations with the first national encuesta poll around how people view AI as in opportunities and risks. So this was a fantastic exercise that then laid the ground for the recent creation these past 2 years of the National Alliance on AI that was led by former Senator Alejandra Lagunes, which also was someone that had led efforts in digital transformation in the previous administration. So that on that side. On the other side, another recent experience that we had is that we partner with the UK Embassy and with Ion Institute in Mexico to organize a set of dialogues around AI. And again, it was a participatory process, but more tailored to experts on AI on 5 working groups, and came up with the policy recommendations for this new administration. But that's, again, as I said, the first category of technology as the topic to convene. A second category is of using technology means, but more as a subtopic of a specific theme. For instance, a project that we had, an initiative with the state of Jalisco, was on the tourism sector. And it was an initiative that was focused specifically on working with startup and SMEs from the tourism sector, and for them to give them with the tools to understand like the value of data, the importance of emerging technologies for this business decision making. So I think this was a really interesting initiative. A third category that I think it's the most innovative, interesting, is the use of emerging technologies for participatory processes. And I recently learned from this startup. It's an MIT spin-off, but founded by or co-founded by a Mexican pioneer. It's called Crowd Voice, and it's really, really interesting because what they're doing is they're already working in 15 countries, but for instance, they're using Llama, Meta's large language model, open source, and they're using it to crowdsource intelligence directly from people's voice. This is very powerful because if we go to traditional ways of polling or getting information, or of just like people's sentiment, or even the INEGI, like the national statistics, you have a massive workforce of pollers and of course methodological solidity, but also very, very high costs. And what this startup is doing is that they're conducting this kind of experiments, but directly through WhatsApp. So you can, with your own voice, respond to the questions that they're asking, and the engine that it has like the interview engine, the analysis engine, the targeting engine using AI, already provides you with the insights, the summary, and the ideas like for policy development. So they partner with UNICEF in Mexico in an initiative called Voices for Childcare. They also have Voices for Digital Economy, Voices for Migrants, Voices for you name it, but they have several initiatives. And I think it's really, really interesting because they had this pilot program with 10,000 people, and it provided insights for childcare access, for what are the barriers and ideas to tackle that program. And the fourth category that I wanted to mention, that it's not necessarily about people's participation, but more about the importance of capacity building in public government, in public servants. And we had an initiative with the UK Embassy in Mexico. It was called GovTech and Digital Transformation. And what was interesting is that it had a focus on local capacity building within municipalities. And it provided the opportunity for 30 local governments in Mexico to learn from best practices from the UK. We had a policy trip where 15 like high-level officials attended and learned from UK best practices around GovTech, cybersecurity, data, and so on. And we had a seminar to exchange these best practices, but also to learn what were the priorities for these 30 governments. So again, I think it's a combination, but definitely what's at the center is people's participation and building the skills and the means and the mechanisms so that the people's voice can be heard.
Yeah, people participation is super interesting, and the governments, when they have to decide in all that possible field of application where to start, they normally decide to start on critics, on critic services, like we can say. Ibrahim, based on your experience and the two companies that you've been founding, what have you learned about digitizing governments and, more than all, services like the justice system?
Thank you for having me here. The gaining trust with government as a citizen or as a user, the system just needs to work. Use your example with the voting. If you couldn't vote, if it took you days to register just to prove your identity, then you wouldn't have had the trust. You wouldn't have told the entire room that the overseas voting worked. And for most people, they get their information. You may check the news 3 times a day, but the information that you trust comes from your friends, your family, your neighbors, and they tell you, oh, I used this new solution that the government offered. And that's how you develop the trust. And so from my experience, it's simple solutions that are always about improving the daily life of whether it's a citizen or it's a business or it's an organization. A lot of the procedures that we have are from government procedures really developed in the 1800s. A lot of the rules that we have, whether it's in the global south or in the north, if it's in the global south, a lot of it comes from countries like France or comes from a country like the UK. And so even those rules that they're still using on a day-to-day basis are foreign and don't really match. They match the needs of maybe a certain segment of society, elite portion of society, or maybe it's not even just elite, a matter of whether or not they're that 1%. But if you have internet, if you're literate, if you have the free time to be able to access, if you have an official bank account, these are a lot of things that millions of people in countries don't have. And we take it for granted in a developed country like the US, or where we have, say, rural area. A rural area in Florida or somewhere in the US is not a rural area, is not the same problems of a rural area in Mexico or Venezuela. And here, you may have a rural area 100 miles away. You may not have the best internet, but at least the people, they speak the same language as the government. They can drive, they have a road, they have access, they have jobs within, it may not be the best jobs, but they have some kind of asset income that they can do. But if you're in a village in Bolivia, there's no road, there's no access, you don't speak the same language even as the people in the capital, nor do you have the same culture. You may not even have trust. You know, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of bad history between different groups between the government and the people. So they may not even have trust that it's their government. Maybe they don't think it's their government. So I think step one, you just have to deliver services that work. Of course, that's a lot. It's very easy to say, you know, give something that works. But for France to develop a system that allows its citizens, French citizens are everywhere in the world, everywhere. They have overseas territories, they have economic relations. Just Africa, French Africa alone has millions of, you know, billions probably in the economy, but millions in terms of the people. The largest French speakers are, the largest French speaking city, I think, is Kinshasa. It's not Paris. And so it's not easy to deliver a system that meets everybody where they are. And so you do need to have good technology. But at the same time, you can't rely on a Facebook or a Meta from San Francisco. You could be lucky and be France and have the engineering capacity, the schools, the low cost of education, the history of mathematics, all of that, where you have resources. But if you're, even a geopolitical giant in Latin America like Mexico may not have the local capacity from day one to develop solutions. So it's a difficult problem.
We all agree that if we have the resources, the capacity, and the will of the government to be doing something, you can have the principle of something, and you involve the people, and you can define policies with them. But what about a country where perhaps you don't have the will from the government part to do this, or a political situation that makes the approach to technology very different than perhaps other countries, because perhaps it's easier not to use technology and not to digitize things, so that we don't show or we don't expose what should be a way of governing a country that is not the one that the international scene would expect from the country.
Yeah, but in this moment, it's a necessity also, because we have 8 million refugees and migrants. So you use primarily the tech to communicate. It's the basic in this moment for almost everyone, to reach your family, your people. And one lesson from the popular consultant, that popular referendum, citizen referendum, in that moment, it's that the people want to be seen, to be involved, it's not only about to go and vote, it's about dignity, it's about a regime who want to silence you, and you want to have a voice. We have the opportunity in that popular consult that the people vote online. But in a cultural way, back in Venezuela, you want to do the line. You want to see people. You want to deposit your paper. You want to see your vote, And we promote like an hybrid. Well, you can vote online, print your receipt, and put it into the box. And in a moment, we have maybe 1,000 political prisoners that the regime threatened. Everybody who participate in the popular consultant, the people came to the streets. So if you want to build confidence in a system, in a solution to close the delivery gap, you have to do it in a human-centered way. Respecting our culture, respecting our ways, but also facilitating, the dignity, the participation. That was useful in the popular consult. That also was useful, all these know-how to digitalize the acts in July 28, back in 2024, to win an election a year ago, all that expertise in some way, not only for the health heroes, also the leaders who participate in the popular consult and organize with a long-spread grassroots movement to use a scanner or a photo back in Delta Macuro, who spend 80% of the day without electricity. Think about internet. We use a Starlink system. You have to also use a lot of creativity to earn the trust, to earn the capacity of people to listen. In a country, in a dictator regime, that trust is difficult because you are constantly attacking in a digital way. And they use the cyberspace also to make a huge scale PsyOps operation. I have to repeat that because It was provocative. What the consul say. Please imagine that in a country like Venezuela, and how the bad guys, Russia, China, Iran, use these satellites to amplify in a huge way and the low-cost way, a very low-cost way, all this kind of cyber attack. The past Friday, and with us, I was victim of cyber attack from Turkey, by the way. My ex account, who have maybe 3 million followers, was hacking in a very, it's not the first time that they try to hack me, not only the ex account, I mean, the Gmail, the phone, I mean, it was an everyday task for me, protect my security, my digital security from the Cuban regime, Venezuelan regime, I mean, and they have very elaborated systems to promote cyber, and they use my account to try to promote not only a scam, also undermining the democratic movement back in Venezuela. So this is a very important moment to settle the basis to the future, because, and this is the last one. 2 months ago, my little girl, 7 years old, came from the school, and they say to me, "Daddy, the Forbes was banned from everywhere." You know, what? A little doll, you know, Forbes. You know, what? What are you doing? What are you talking about? A doll. I mean, a 7 years old girl was victim of cyber attack. I mean, misinformation. Who told you that? No, a friend of mine, a good source. A friend of mine in the school. Oh, okay. Let's check this. Let's double check this. Let's Google it. No. Ask ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT. Let's try. What can we ask them? If they sell it in Amazon, if they sell it, they're good. But how do you do that without undermining the trust in her friend? And let's translate this to social. How you do that without undermining the trust on media, on government, on good people, on reference? So that's the dilemma in this moment, to earn trust without undermine social trust in a difficult moment to the war, you know?
You made me a good bridge for for a question for Ibrahim. How do you think we can responsibly integrate AI? Because he's been talking about ChatGPT, so I'm going directly to you. Yeah. How can we responsibly integrate AI into government services while we maintain at the same time transparency and accountability?
Well, first we need to have a foundation layer. If your own government agency doesn't have a website, or if the website is buggy, or if the website doesn't have the right information and is not up to date, you have to start there. You have to have your basic elements of technology. You have to be able to communicate with your own clients. As a government agency, you have to treat your users as clients or users, not forced users, you know, like more of a business in terms of your customers. If you're the consulate, it's your customers that are coming and doing appointments with you.
The citizen is a client.
Yes, exactly. And you may even, do you want me to take questions or? Oh. You may even have to look at it as a technology business where government is famous as not necessarily being an early adopter. You know, they may not be the first. If there's a new technology, there's AI, They may not be the first. There were private companies have been using AI in different fields for years or decades. So government is not always the first to use a new technology. And when you're a technology business, you divide your customers and you say, okay, here's my early adopters, here's my late adopters. And the government has to look at their own population, their own citizens in the same way. And in terms of the services that they're offering in the same way, to know how to deliver faster and how to deliver appropriately.
And Christina, so do you think that there is a way we can ensure equitable access across the diverse population, taking into account what Ibrahim's just said and the president before?
No, yes, definitely. It's a hard question because it's a hard process, but it needs to be done. And I have a couple of comments of the interventions that my colleagues were doing. I think for the responsible AI adoption from government, there's also a really close opportunity to align to international frameworks that are already based on the respect of human rights, aligned to democratic processes. And I'm thinking specifically of UNESCO's recommendation on the ethics of AI. It has 11 policy areas of action with very specific recommendations each. And then there's also regional efforts like the convening the summit on the ethics of AI, which the Declaration of Santiago and the Declaration of Montevideo last year, which outline the regional work so that we also coordinate as one voice. Because again, we're like getting behind on these conversations when context matters, when we each have different priorities, and when we at least need to have a common agenda so that we can take these use cases, needs, examples to the international debates. So I think that, for instance, is a first necessary step in terms of bringing down these frameworks to the national, subnational levels. Then I also had two quick comments about what you were saying in Venezuela. One is that, now that you mentioned the Furby, I remember there's an excellent novel by Schweblin that's specifically about that, like Furbies having, it's like science fiction, like an impact on the lives of people. And it looks a bit like, or reads a bit like a Black Mirror episode, but I really recommend it because not only it's a Latin American female author, but also it really provides you insight with the kind of people's interaction with technology and how we're getting there. And on the other side, with elections, these past 2 years, I was with the International Republican Institute working in an international group around the impact of generative AI in democracy. And one of the use cases that we found that emerged as a very creative best practice was the emergence of the Chama and Pana initiative, which after the elections were AI-generated news anchors that were providing people with information because the journalists were being jailed. So I think even though we can speak about disinformation, misinformation, or all the perils of technology, there are also positive use cases that signal for participation, creativity, and opportunities for people to organize and to resist. And I thought this was like a really interesting example. As for ensuring equitable access, I think there are different layers because, of course, we need connectivity, we need digital skills, but we also need to understand that it's not just about following a certain set of steps. For instance, in Mexico right now, we're 6 months in the new administration of President Claudia Sheinbaum, and there's a new digital agency that was created. It's very, very powerful. It's very transversal to all the sectors, but it has outlined its priorities very clearly. It's about process simplification, like government digital services, and improving revenue tax collection. And this is like a daunting task, I think. It's great that they have their priorities, but I think you shouldn't necessarily leave the emerging technology agenda as if I need to work on this first and then on these other issues. And to me, it's not necessarily a balance between innovation or priorities or equitable access, but more about design principles. Because I think I perhaps can illustrate it better with an example. We work with the government of Guanajuato at the PIT Policy Lab together with USAID and with a consortium of international organizations on a use case on education. And they had this system to prevent school dropout. And we had like a series of research questions around gender bias. And we used an open source tool that identified and mitigated gender bias in the databases of this ministry, and found that this tool was mislabeling 4% of women as not being at risk of leaving school. And perhaps 4% isn't bad. It depends on what are your metrics, right? Perhaps it's okay, or perhaps it's a lot because it means 4 in 100 girls are not necessarily getting targeted with the policy to stay in school. But it was also an opportunity to reflect with civil servants, with policymakers around the issues that affect and impact differently women and men. So we had trainings in gender and technology, human rights and technology, and the kind of discussions, and these were completely analog, were amazing because they were like, I had never thought about these issues from this lens. And from that project came a policy recommendations report, a change in the policy itself, an ethics guide, and a checklist for governments developing AI projects within the public service. And it's open and it's available for everyone. And even though it's focused on education, I think it really provides insight for anyone in the public sector that is trying to innovate with AI responsibly. So to that question, I think those tools and those kind of examples illustrate how we can really think through things differently from the beginning.
You've just said a magic word for the people we are working in the private sector: metrics. I'm going to launch the question to the three of you, because this is super important. Really, what metrics would you use, or should you use at a country level, to evaluate whether GovTech or a policy is genuinely building trust in the public, is genuinely helping people in the relationship between the citizen and the government? Metrics. The second magic word is security. We will talk about security afterward.
Well, metrics, I think you can use several proxies because measuring trust, I think, is very hard. But it can be both qualitative and quantitative. And I think it can go, and I think they respond to a very specific question, and it's something that you were saying: does this solve for the problem that it was created? Does this technology solution solve for the problem that it was created for? Does it work, basically? But for proxies, in terms of quantitative, you can have numbers of downloads if it's an app, although I think that one's tricky because perhaps everyone's downloading it and it doesn't work. Number of procedures, or number of less procedures perhaps that you had before in terms of simplification, ratings, feedback mechanisms. In terms of qualitative, I think it's mouth-to-mouth recommendation. Again, as you just said, like, you recommend it because it works. And testimonies from people that also allow you to create narratives and to scale the impact and to take this kind of solutions to other places. I think it's also, it's work in progress. I think as these kind of novel solutions are being developed, on the other side, the evaluators are also innovating in terms of methodologies, and so that we can measure more precisely the impact that these technologies are having. specifically for the problems that they're solving, but more nuanced around democracy, like around the fabric of society and the impact on democratic institutions.
On your platforms, Ibrahim?
Metrics are an essential component. We actually essentially provide a separate product, data dashboards, that goes with every solution that we offer. And we could sell it as a separate standalone solution, but we give it built in as part of every solution. And metrics are important, KPIs are important. They're of course different, they're context-based. And it's also from the perspective of, let's take the digital office in Mexico. If their goal is to increase tax revenue, then they have a very simple metric to figure out how much did we earn from digital sources of revenue. In other cases, it may be a little bit harder. Using your example of the false information, like in El Salvador, they have the Bitcoin wallet. And if you have a political element that decides to use the metrics in a marketing way, they'll skew the actual progress of the project, and the people will know. The people, if you say, hey, this is a successful implementation, everybody's downloaded it, but nobody's using it, then you know that it's a dishonest broker metric at that point. So you have to have dashboards that are transparent, but you also can't let political establishment be the source of those metrics, or have veto power over the metrics, or because sometimes it's gonna make things look bad. It's gonna make the government look bad. It's gonna make different providers look bad. So you have to have just honest metrics, and that's also a lot harder to say it than to implement it than to say it. A lot of countries, they have statistics divisions or bureaus or departments. So it would be good to have a third-party agency that's responsible for auditing the information. But if that agency isn't strong enough, whether technically or politically, that may not be a path to success either.
Which metrics have you set up in the Democracy Lab?
Well, for us, it's democracy, so it's very difficult in this moment to measure around also in Venezuela. And for the people, for me, it's the delivery. I mean, it's useful to his needs. For me, it's the main one. And after that, you can generate proxies. I mean, downloads application. I mean, for us in healthcare sector, in the health heroes, was maybe 98.9% of efficiency, because the database that we create, that the people download, the people made the link, took his money, convert into dollars or bolívares back in Venezuela. They're useful in this moment about the humanitarian crisis, but that was almost 99% of efficiency in the Consulta Popular, in the consultant back in 2021. Also, we created a database in 2 weeks against a dictator regime, almost 4 million people who participate, almost 85% of that people that register in the first way, because in the first case, the economic incentive was very clear. You know, the people need his money, and the incentive was very clear. So it's very effective, and the metric very clearly in the consultant, in the popular consultant also. But in this moment, talking about the diaspora, by example, 8 million migrants and refugees, they use his communication networks to provide, to send money, to convert not only information, assistant, healthcare assistant, education. I mean, it's a lot that we can close the digital bridge, also the delivery, how to help and strengthen the public sector focused on needs in this moment. But also being resilient. That is different, by the way, of evolve. Being resilient is to support strength or forces and maintain your form. It's a concept took it from engineer, you know, from material resistencia de materiales, like material resistant, you know. Evolve if to evolve, to make it better, to make it efficient. So that they're different in this moment. So we have to figure out what need to evolve and what concept need to be resilient. I mean, the democracy, the participation of the people, the dignity of the people, and where the lack of delivery. I mean, we were in a human crisis, not only democracy, the multilateralism system. I mean, about delivery. I mean, so there are holes. So you don't want to a resilient hole, you know, because you are reiterating in the crisis. So we need to be very clear and took the metric again in a human and responsible way, because we need some methods to evolve and some concepts to be resilient. And I think it starts with the empathy, you know, to most vulnerable people, those who don't have access, but they want be part, and that's important not to take it for granted. Freedom, liberty, access. So in this moment, the technology, e-government can help a lot in a creative way. We already use these avatars to inform both the trust. You know, not everybody trusts in an avatar. They need yes. So it's like tricky, you know. Again, it's a trade-off constantly for us and for everybody. I mean, it's not only about Venezuela; it's about democracy. And again, so in short term, we have to build this trust, this resilience, and this needed to evolve in all the ways possible, being human-centered.
That's true. We could be here 4 hours talking about that, but we're going to make space for questions. You want to add something, Ibrahim, before we go to the questions?
I had one example with the metrics. Let's take in our platform, one of the biggest benefits is communication, the ability for the government to instantly communicate with anybody. And with electronic communication, you know if they saw it. You can ask them to respond. You can ask them to click. Of course, there's a little bit of trust building for the recipient to believe that it's the government, especially if it's in an area where the government doesn't normally communicate. But one of the most important metrics that we offer through that is an unreachable rate, the percentage of your population that you can't reach. And so instead of, by default, sending police or sending mail or sending all these different things for everybody that you need to communicate, you need to reach, you're only supporting those 3% or 4% or 5%. But in a country like Venezuela, the government itself is unreachable. So how do you build trust that way? Of course, you can have a new political party that takes on the role of the government in order to develop the trust. But if you're the government and you're trying to gain that, it doesn't work unless you're reachable in the first place, unless you're available.
Yeah, that's it.
And accountable. Exactly.
Let's go for the question.
Hi, my name is Lynn, and I wanted to ask a question to the former president, interim president of Venezuela. And Ibrahim, you also kind of answered my question, so I just wanted to go deeper. I'd also like to hear your response, Christina, as well. But you mentioned, for example, like Venezuela's government being, unreachable. And Mr. President, you mentioned earlier, like, Iran, China, Russia, working together to spread misinformation. And I'm just curious, first, do you think metrics are an effective way of dismantling, when nations are colluding together to spread disinformation, like how effective do you think metrics are in dismantling that disinformation, especially when there already is political corruption and kind of like a weak government with, in connection with the citizens? So I'm just wondering, if it's not metrics, what other methods do you think are effective in dismantling that misinformation when it's like nations colluding together to spread it?
Well, it's a very good question because they don't use only for misinformation itself. That's the tool for manipulate, to promote a false narrative, to watch propaganda, to commit psyops in a big scale way to manipulate opinion or public opinion in third countries, like the election in other countries. I want to point that one, but in the Democracy iLab, in 2 months we are presenting specifically one that they use in Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Russia, China, to try to manipulate public opinion in the US and North America, not only US, Mexico, and also Canada. I mean, thinking in Miranda, my little girl, my 7 years old little girl, it's about critical thinking. I mean, it looks like basis, but it starts in education. I mean, because how you build trust, and also to explain Miranda about banned purpose, without undermine his trust in society, in his BFF back in school. If you translate, you transpose that to Venezuela, for example, that we don't have any media or free media in this moment back in Venezuela. We only have social media, and with a short range, because they make a lot of noise around the web. So we have to make a huge effort to not substitute marketing, policy marketing, with public policy. And we live in this moment in a ultra polarized world, we live in the post-truth era, So we need to start with the basics. We need to show, because, I mean, we have a lot of apps, fact-checking pages, but the people don't use it. And the consul say, fake news travel 6 times the truth or the fact-checking news. And that's in a human way. We love el chisme. In English, is the gossip. The human, is this true? And you send the misinformation all over, all use WhatsApp groups. Yeah. Is this truth? Is this really, where do you know about this?
And more awful, better.
And all the, yeah. So we need to start with basic. We need to promote fact-checking, and this is important, taking, we need to start to make accountable regimes like Russia for promoting propaganda. It's not only about misinformation, I have to insist, to make a cognitive war. I like that phrase, because that's very accurate in this moment. If we don't make accountable people, we are condemned to lose democracy, I have to say. It's difficult to express this, but we are in a very difficult moment. If you ask me, we have to start to basics, education, and to teach Miranda how to have critical thinking in a very precise way, to earn trust and to think by his own. I mean, I know it's not easy, it's not like an app, but we need to insist.
Can I comment quickly?
Yeah, sure. And
Perfect.
then we're gonna
I
close.
think metrics are essential for for any digital transformation strategy beyond disinformation. But if we focus specifically on disinformation or misinformation, I think we can see it both from the technical or from more the human community-led angle. And from the technical, there are technical solutions or like watermarking AI systems or Gen AI or Gen AI content, or there's even AI solutions that are detecting on false speech or comments or initiatives that like the rest of the world has one focus on journalism, specifically from the technical angle. From the community-led angle, of course, supporting fact checkers, and it's a hard time because fact-checking efforts are diminishing in a region, and the rest of the world. And there's also interesting gamification strategies that are being just like tried to engage people so they can also be part of the spotting of this kind of information. And then I think there are interesting initiatives worth highlighting from the look of the private sector. I was part of several trainings conducted by Meta in Mexico because of the elections last year. And WhatsApp specifically has changed a lot of its feature to narrow misinformation practices like the forwarding of messages. It limited it. I don't know if you saw it or if you've experienced when you try to send something and it says, this message has already been shared too many times, you cannot share it anymore. It has very specific actions, but that are essential to to not only better understanding this phenomena, but to also guardrailing democracy against all these information threats. So I think collaborating with big tech companies and specifically where people are, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, or other social media is key. TikTok, well, that's another conversation, but but it's key. Yeah.
Just to point that the watermark could be very useful to track information, not only to mark, also to track. That could be in a technical way very useful.
I like the idea to close on public-private collaboration for that matter, because it is true that in the end our citizens are our clients, and there is a way we are treating our clients in the private companies towards innovation and digitization of the services we are delivering to them. So we do the same from the governments, taking our citizens for customers too. Trust is very difficult to earn. We told it, and it's earned through transparency, consistent delivery of good services. This is true in the private sector, and this is true in the public sector too. And more than all, with the meaningful participation of the people involved, our customers or our citizens. And all you three, our panelists, you've been highlighted very well that the successful digital transformation or digitization of the government will be in a balance of the innovation with the inclusion, with the education for sure, and ensuring that all our communities are involved and nobody is left behind. Because if we have a group of persons that is not attended, we still have the risk of misinformation, and this misinformation being multiplied by the communication to the rest of the people. So I like closing on that private-public collaboration. We have a lot to do still, but we can see in all the countries in Europe, in Asia, and now all over the Americas that we are progressing well, and that technology is accelerating things. And this is yet a big victory Thank you.